So delighted to welcome you here. We've met on numerous occasions, and obviously that has been virtual since launching Elevate. But when we put together our innovation group and we looked for who would add value, not just in terms of knowledge and expertise, but who had that real collaborative spirit, your name was one of the first ones that came up, and we were so happy that you agreed to be a part of it. Could you start today by just telling us a little bit about your role and what it is that you do?
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's hard to follow on from the guys at ProMate, given what they're doing. But yeah, a bit about me. So I'm a director at EY's practice here in Manchester. Spent most of my career within consulting and strategy. I started off in London before I moved back up here. I also spent some time at the Alcock Group, where I was the group head of strategy there. So now my focus is on helping predominantly retail and consumer product clients with their strategy and growth agenda.
Incredible. And so you touched a little bit on one of the sectors that you work on there, but what's the kind of range of clients that you work with?
Almost everything. So anyone from a scale-up to early-stage startup to your large FTSE 100 clients across that whole spectrum. I guess for me personally, I work with a lot of CFOs, CEOs, MDs, but as EY, we'll work with anyone from cross-functional areas.
Amazing. And that must have given you such an incredible insight to what we've all been watching from the sidelines over the last 12 to 18 months, particularly some of the stuff that's gone on in that retail space. But how has the pandemic altered the conversations around innovation and kind of businesses' level of risk there?
God, where do we start? So,
just the small questions today, don't worry.
I mean, actually, in some ways, if you think about innovation, I think the first couple of weeks, I think innovation stopped to some extent. So a lot of companies that had R&D business units, all of a sudden it was like, what on earth do we do? And so spend stopped. It was more around protecting the business here and now rather than focusing ahead until everyone kind of knew where they were heading. For some businesses, that meant pivoting their business models. So a lot of, say, cosmetics or particularly actually alcohol brands started producing alcohol gels as a result. For others, there was a whole thing around technology and adoption. So if you think about adopting, obviously, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, we came years ahead of where we normally would have done. On average, it's about 20 to 25 times quicker in terms of adoption than normally would have done.
That's unbelievable, isn't it? Because we look at some of those trends and, some things, like how could we ever have predicted that we would be in this world? But actually some of those trends like the online shopping, your Microsoft Teams, your Zoom, it's not new, it's just so accelerated. And what have been those kind of, real hot topics over the last year or so?
A lot of it's been around what sorts of technology to use and how best to use them. So I kind of feel sorry for the guys who are in the Skype team, for example, at Microsoft, who had an application which worked, and all of a sudden Teams popped up, and everyone started using Teams, and all of a sudden no one used Skype. So as well as new technology adoption, there was a lot of rationalization of technology as well, truly understanding what works for workforces. There was also quite a lot of time spent around customer experience and employee experience in particular, especially given everyone wasn't stuck in front of their laptops. Truly understanding what employees are doing and making sure they were getting the best of their day and being productive was a big focus area for sure. I'd say collaboration was a key area as well. So more so than ever, you could collaborate, and you could collaborate not only within your office with different teams, but actually in terms of geography as well. So for us as EY, I work with a lot of global clients, and previously you might spend a lot of time traveling. So I was on a project last year, which was Thailand, Brazil, the US, and Mexico. And that would have meant days lost in terms of traveling to different locations. Instead, you could do that over an 18-hour day. You could work with multiple clients in different areas in one place.
Which, as you say, there's a phenomenal time and cost saving there, which is huge. But from a sustainability point of view, that's got to be absolutely massive in terms of potential saving carbon footprints of not flying people around the world and doing all of that travel.
Oh, massively. And I think, going forwards, a lot of what we've done over the past 18 months will be here to stick and stay, right? There was definitely a point around collaboration was done differently. So it is difficult sometimes to have the same energy you would have in a room. And a lot of that isn't necessarily the actual collaboration on, say, a particular whiteboard. It's the social element. And it's the idea where you're talking over dinner, then all of a sudden you've got a brainwave and think, right, that it is happening. Whereas I think what we found during the pandemic was people were engaging in sessions, but it was very transactional. So you'd have an agenda, you dial on for 50 minutes, 55 minutes, you get to the point, you finish it, and you move on. Whereas, and I think that's where you will have a lot more going forward in terms of innovation, which is people will get together to have a lot more of the social building and building relationships.
Absolutely, and there is that real balance, isn't there? That it's like we can be very, very efficient online, but we lose some of that social element. And there's obviously been a lot of conversations around, are we going back to the office? What's that going to look like? We obviously work very closely with Bruntwood Works, and they've got some incredible spaces. And one of the things that we've loved going back in them is just hearing voices and seeing people and that really kind of relaxed element. But at the same time, as a business, we're probably not going to go back into being in one fixed office all of the time. What's kind of EY's approach been in terms of making sure you get that socialisation, that collaboration? Have you got a plan yet as to what that's going to look like?
So I think we announced about 2 weeks ago now our plan, which is it kind of depends on you and your clients. So the average is you probably spend 2 days in the office, 2 days at home, and then that 1 day to decide where you want to work, sort of thing. But it very much depends on our clients. So if our clients are in their offices 5 days a week, then we'll be there. Likewise, if you don't need to be on a client site or don't need to be in an office, then again, you work from home. I think the plan is collaborate where you can in person, especially if you're new to a team, make sure you integrate and get them involved. And actually, we've innovated ourselves in how we book ourselves in the office. So everyone now has an app. You book your desk in advance. The app actually works in terms of sensors. So you will book your desk, and then when you turn up to the office, the actual app will identify whether you're actually in the office or not. That then triggers how close you are to other individuals, and therefore, if there is ever a COVID outbreak, for example, it knows who was near you, and it tells those people to isolate.
Amazing, and that's such an interesting blend there of like, there was definitely that trajectory anyway in terms of how are we using our spaces, how can we get those kind of processes right to be able to collaborate and innovate, and then the kind of curveball that none of us expected that like, I literally need to know if I was 2 meters away from you or not, which we probably didn't see coming. As we kind of look ahead, and we know things have been delayed again a little bit, but we are hopefully home straight now. We're going to be looking ahead coming out of this pandemic. What are the kind of trends that you see coming in innovation?
So I'd say there's quite a few. If I think about particularly, say, consumer-facing trends, so definitely worth looking at China in terms of stuff that's happening out there. A lot around social selling and live streaming, for example. So
we're here already.
Exactly.
Head of the trend, guys.
So imagine a QVC crossed with, say, the Avon style of business model of shopping. That's exactly what's happening out in China right now. So you've got micro-influencers who will live stream products with their friends and their family, and actually are able to get preferential rates on products to customers. So that's definitely happening out in China. I can see that moving here. I would also say stuff like robotics, but in terms of consumer experience. So as everyone was using Deliveroo last year, as an example, you obviously have riders physically delivering of products. There's a trend out in America at the moment where they're testing driverless cars and vans, but to actually deliver products. So there's a company called Robomart, for example, which is an app-based company. You want bread or fruit, wherever, it will come to you driverless. You go outside, you don't literally scan anything, you just pick up what you want from outside your house, go back inside your house again, and again, the full transactions happen. So, I would see a lot of that sort of happening. And a lot of it is based around connectivity, Internet of Things, especially with 5G, we're being more proficient than ever before. It will allow us to do a lot more in terms of, from a customer experience perspective.
And there's presumably a bit of a balance there, because there's part of me thinking, well, how delightfully convenient. And the other bit of me is thinking, that sounds terrifying. How do you balance those kind of, I want everything to be, just like brought by a robot to my door, but then also like, do I want driverless cars on my road? Like there's quite a balance of issues there.
No, 100%. And a lot of that will be around the humans who control a lot of that. So, another big trend is going to be around big data, AI and machine learning, but not to replace humans. So I think what you'll find actually is AI and machine learning will do a lot of the repetitive tasks that we do today, and then it will just allow people to do more value-added tasks. And ultimately, it'll be dependent on us as consumers where we spend our money, right? So if we choose not to use robotics and use driverless vehicles, then that won't happen. But I think it will just be ways to just improve the experience. So for those who know about the Amazon shop in London, for example, where you go in, you buy what you need, there isn't anyone at the tills, you can walk straight back out, then that may happen for some people. But I think at the same time, what you will find is a number of shops, actually, they will have increased number of shoppers because some people just want the experience, and that's what they'll do instead.
And I think we've really appreciated some of that back to basics, because it's been taken away from us for a while, that those things, we chatted about it in terms of like working and having people in that office environment. But when we couldn't physically go into a shop for a long time, it suddenly felt exciting and novel again, and an increase perhaps in kind of, local suppliers. We touched then on that sustainability element of things. That's clearly, that is the big challenge that we have to face is around kind of climate change, and retail is part of the problem and also part of the solution. Are we seeing any kind of advances in that space that are being driven by doing things in a more carbon neutral way?
100%. So I think particularly now that the proficiency of e-commerce has exploded over the past year, I think a lot of retailers, especially online companies, have had to relook at how they do, particularly logistics and shipping. So the idea that plastic bags have been sent to you are no longer going to happen. They'll probably be decombustible. You'll be able to dispose of them properly. A lot of the clothes are made of plastic now, so a lot of recycling is happening in that front. And actually a lot more listening to consumers about what exactly consumers want. There's also a lot more happening around like Depop and business models where you actually resell your clothes, which stop you buying a lot of fast fashion. So I think there'll definitely be a lot more trend in terms of recyclable goods. So I think Asda also announced recently you can buy secondhand goods in Asda as well. So I think definitely you'll see a lot more of that.
That's a huge normalisation, isn't it? And we've spoken on specific webinars about sustainable fashion in the past, and it is sometimes it's that change of behaviour that is really easy to get excited about. Here's this amazing way of recycling something, the different materials that we can use, but actually, like, why not go and buy something that's already been loved by somebody else? Like, it's just quite a simple but innovative solution to doing that. So just before we draw to a close, what's the kind of one area of innovation that you're most excited about? What's the one that you're keeping a little eye on, thinking, I want to see what happens in that space?
I think for me personally, it is going to be that blend between robotics and humans, and in particular how we manage that and how we transition from the world we're into today. So the idea that you might get your deliveries dropped off by a drone could be exciting, but at the same time, what does it mean for actually the humans involved as well and the people manning that? I think that will be the most exciting part for the next couple of years. And I would say actually it'll be quicker than we imagine. So the idea that it might not be driverless cars, but it might be the driverless technology then enabling you to do other things differently.
Incredible. Well, that is good enough for me to decide that is one that I'm also going to be keeping an eye on, and hopefully you'll come back and join us in the near future with some of the clients working in that space and find out a little more about it. We are now going to go into a short comfort break, so feel free to grab yourself a cuppa and we'll be back in 5 minutes or so. Whilst we're having that break, we are going to take the opportunity just to show you a little bit more of this incredible hotel that we're in, and then when we come back, we are doing everything from processes of innovation to literally space tech. I cannot wait and hope to see you there in a few minutes.